So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's AHP Showcase, Practice Learning Showcase for Operating Department Practice. My name is Neil Hudson-Basing. I'm the Corporate Events Manager for London South Bank University. I've just got some virtual housekeeping to take you through before I hand over to my colleagues. So starting with a short statement on respect and dignity. Everyone speaking at or attending an LSBU event, whether in person or virtually, should be treated with respect, dignity and courtesy. LSBU operates an environment built on equality, inclusion and acceptance. We value contributions, feedback and comments and wish to create a space for sharing, learning, celebrating and bringing communities together. LSBU does not tolerate any form of bullying, abuse, harassment or discrimination. Inappropriate behaviour, including that potentially impacts or contradicts LSBU's reputation or values, will be treated seriously and acted upon. Anyone exhibiting any example of this behaviour will also be removed from the webinar. We want our events to be an enjoyable, safe and warm experience for all. Thank you for adhering to these guidelines. So just to take you through the Zoom functionality quickly, you'll see that there's the chat box and it's great to see people making use of that already. Please continue to do so by letting us know who you are, what you do and where you're joining from. In the absence of seeing you face to face, it's great to know who our audience are and it helps us to break down the virtual wall that we're all experiencing at the moment. Next button along is the Q&A button and I'd like to encourage you to pop any questions that you have in there during the event and distinguish that between that and the chat box. You can also upvote on the questions you most want answered by clicking the thumbs up symbols. You'll also see that I've just enabled closed captioning, which are the subtitles that are appearing on your screen right now. You can hide those if you want to by clicking the little up arrow and clicking hide subtitles. That's all from me. Please, if you have any questions, use the chat box. You can pop them over and I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Rebecca.
Hello, thank you, Neil. Okay, I'm just going to start off by sharing my slides. Interesting, this is annoying. Right, okay, can you see my slides?
You can see them, they're just not in slideshow mode at the moment.
Right, yeah, the thing's in the way of it. It's the other box is in the way, unfortunately. I'm going to...
Is it, do you mean the little us all along the side? You can pick that up and move that out the way.
Okay. Okay, is that better?
It's great.
Great. Okay, great. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to see so many people on the call today. So welcome to the event entitled AHP Practice Learning Showcase ODP. So the plan for this afternoon is we look forward to sharing our strategy for the next year and the ongoing work we're doing to expand opportunities for students. Okay, so first of all, an introduction to the team. We don't have everybody that's talking on the call here listed on this slide, but just to give you an overview of the people within our division and within the ODP team. We've got Gail Edwards, who's our head of division, not with us today. There's myself that probably many of you already know. My name's Rebecca Sherwood. I'm the course director for the ODP BSc Honours degree. We've also got Joanne Fielding, who is our practice learning lead for ODP. We've also got Daniel Roger, who is our recruitment lead. And we also have Thomas Ince, who is our AHP practice learning lead. And I'm just going to first of all go through a brief overview of the programme today for you. So you already have probably seen the programme, but just to reiterate, I'm going to provide an overview of the practice learning that occurs with the ODP. And then after that, Thomas Ince and Chloe Keith are going to talk about the AHP practice learning strategy at LSBU, so more of a broad overview of that. And then that's going to be followed by ODP practice learning opportunities. And that's going to be undertaken by Joanne, who I said is our practice learning lead, and one of our third year students as well, talking, Thomas McGurran. After that, Thomas is going to come back in and talk about our LSBU practice learning anti-racism strategy. And that then is going to be followed by, again, a sort of broad overview about ODP apprenticeships, because we are starting those this year. After that, be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. There'll be a Q&A with the programme team, followed by closing remarks and summary by Thomas. So I hope that's okay with everybody, and we'll get cracking. Okay, so just to start off by saying, as I'm sure you're all aware, it has been an extremely challenging year this year for various reasons, but of course the big one has been COVID. The last 12 months have certainly been like no others. The COVID-19 pandemic, with its requirements for social distancing and PPE, has caused a lot of problems both within the university and in placement. And I'm sure all of you, if you're placement providers, have been aware of the changes that have happened in placement. So in terms of ODP in particular, we were kind of very much affected by the fact that a lot of the elective surgery was cancelled or postponed very early on this year. So students which were going to be starting in January or returning in January had placements delayed. So we had to postpone those. Obviously, that was very stressful for everyone at the time, because we didn't know when they would be allowed into placement and when those kind of competencies and things could be achieved. So the first years did not start their placements until January onwards. And because of this, adjustments were made to their hours requirements and advice given on how they could still achieve what they needed to by the end of the year. The first years were most affected, I think it was fair to say, but the second and third years were also affected by delays for return to placement in January. So again, we made hours adjustments and looked at what competencies could be moved elsewhere and adjusted. I'm really pleased to say that despite these intense difficulties this year, students from all cohorts are on track to achieve their competencies and their requirements, either by the June submission or by the 2nd July submission. So given that we've really kind of pulled out all the stops, practice placement has really pulled out the stops for such a difficult year. So this slide is just to say really a big thank you to everybody for all your support for our students out in practice. We know that normally it's always, quite challenging and quite difficult. Lots of things happen in practice, it's emergency scenarios, all sorts of things happening. But I think this year with COVID, it's just knocked everybody over. But despite that, I think we've still sort of come out on top and we've learned a lot from it. So thank you once again for that. I really appreciate that. And the whole team does. Okay, so I'm now going to provide a sort of overview for practice learning and operating department practice. Now, I'm aware that many of you may already know this, but some of you may not. So it's just kind of giving you a sort of broad overview of what we do. So anybody aware of operating department practitioners will know that practice placements are the heart of ODP training. Placements start in semester 1 of our first year. So we crack on getting students into placement sometimes much earlier than other professions. Student ODPs spend increasing time in placements as they progress through each year to graduation as well. Traditionally, ODPs train to become competent in all 3 areas of operating department practice. So we know anaesthetic, surgery and recovery areas. However, ODPs can be found working in diverse areas of the hospital, and they can be working in MRI units, endoscopy, interventional radiology, in A&E as part of trauma teams, and as well as critical care areas such as ITU. The ODP's skills in caring for acutely ill patients specifically came to the fore during the recent COVID pandemic, where ODPs joined their nursing and other AHP colleagues in caring for those ever expanding and overflowing critical care areas in many of our country's hospitals. So even though it's a difficult time, it's a really good time to shine with the skills that you have as well. So this particular photograph here is Menelik Lynch, and again, some people may already know him. So he was a successful alumni of the degree of 2017. and he's been going from strength to strength. He's a senior theatre practitioner and equipment lead. So that's an overview of that. So now I'm going to talk briefly about what we do in terms of practice placements for ODPs. So anyone that's not aware of the kind of areas we send our ODPs to and what they cover in different parts of the year. Just before that, I just want to say that obviously practice learning has to be the most fundamental part of the degree. We all know that we, as lecturers, we concentrate a lot on the academic side, but without the practice placement, it doesn't make sense without anything we're doing. So it is really the core of the learning, even more so than the academic components. It's required by accredited courses and it's required by the HCPC. It applies and consolidates course learning. If you can't apply theory to practice, then obviously the students can't make sense of what they're learning. It develops skills and competencies in order to go onto the register. So they are specific requirements in order to achieve a qualification as an ODP and join the register. And it creates partnerships, obviously, between the HEIs and the providers as well. So just to give you an overview, you can see that in our first year here, in semester 1, we start with Introduction to Perioperative Practice Skills. And as the name suggests, it's all the sort of basics about being in the operating theatre. So a lot of that is about infection control, health and safety, how to get dressed for theatre, and just to make them understand how the environment works and feel comfortable. Then in semester 2, we follow it by sort of straightforward basic placements in fundamental anaesthetics and surgery, where they get a kind of introduction to those skills, but not at a very complex level, so quite basic at that level. And then the second year is all about building those skills. So then we start off with the ambulatory care placement in the first semester. This introduces them to, as well, the whole patient journey, and it also looks at pre-admission areas, step down and discharge. So it really makes them understand from a patient point of view the whole surgical process. So they look at that in the first semester. And then in semester 2, hopefully they've got enough of an overview from what they've done so far to undertake a recovery placement for the patient post-operative, that they can then look after their care needs. So they then learn about all the kind of core recovery skills. They also have a module called Developing Complex Skills, and they get a chance to then again do more complex patient groups, such as shared airway anesthesia. So for example, ENT, trauma and obstetric placements. So that's covered within developing. Finally, they get to the third year. And at this point, we're really expecting the students to be undertaking quite advanced skills. And at the end of it, we really want them sort of running lists with, supervision of their mentors. So they're completely ready for qualification. So they undertake advanced surgical and anaesthetic skills in the preparation for practice module. In the first semester, they also undertake a paediatric placement, which we're also going to use a placement expansion for that first semester to include some other specialities, but Joe is going to talk more about that later. And then in the second semester, they also have finalised a enhanced recovery module, which is really building on their recovery skills, but looking at those, critically ill patients or patients with additional needs. So this could be overnight recovery, it might be HTU, it might be ITU areas. So hopefully that kind of gives you a sort of broad overview of our placement allocations and our placement timetable in terms of the first, second and third years. Okay, so one of the things we're looking at, obviously in ODP, as well as a lot of the other allied health professions as well, is expansion. Obviously, the system demands AHP workforce expansion. We've got ever increasing demands for new recruits in the clinical area as different services improve and expand. So this is what we intend to supply to all the hospitals and trusts. So AHPs are vital for delivering the ambitions of the NHS long-term plan. And at undergraduate level, they're part of our programme. What we're doing over the 3 years is upskilling those ODPs to meet this demand. This will mean, however, that obviously ODPs will have more practice learning requirements, but hopefully then at the end, they will be more employable in different areas and have the skills to move forward. The long-term plan is that obviously a lot of care will be delivered closer to home, and ODPs along with other HPs have a vital role to play at all levels of the plan, and therefore they will need a broad range of skills. It's also worth bearing in mind that sometimes those skills are not necessarily what we might intuitively think as our sort of bog standard clinical skills, but sort of advanced skills in leadership, etc. Okay, so we're also, in terms of the expansion strategy, obviously committed to AHP expansion, employability, and diversifying practice learning outcomes. And this is to ensure a sustainable future for AHPs and the ODP population in particular. It is encouraging to know that ODPs are currently the fastest growing AHP profession at 3%. And so we continue, hopefully, with that upward trend in the future. Okay, so once again, thank you for coming. And I'm going to now hand over to Thomas and Chloe. And they're going to be discussing more about our overall AHP practice learning strategy. Thank you. Okay,
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm just going to share my presentation. Fab. Do let me know if you can't see my screen. So in line with the long-term plan, we need to increase our AHP workforce by 27,000 and another 4,000 from the Richards Review, which means supporting more students and more apprentices so they can join our future workforce and teams. To support this work, last summer, Health Education England gave £1.2 million of funding across London, and my role has been to support practice learning for AHPs across the capital. I'm Chloe, I'm a physio by background and AHP clinical fellow, working with Laura Ledsford, our London AHP lead for Health Education England, to support practice learning. And it's fantastic to be here and be part of the work LSBU are doing for ODP practice learning. Capital AHP is the joint work by NHS England and NHS Improvement and Health Education England. Here you can see the work that's being developed across the capital. To give an overview, as part of student practice learning, we're really working in the first aim around learning and development. There are lots of relevant policy documents, but as Rebecca mentioned, key to this conversation are the long-term plan, the people plan, and AHPs into action. Health Education England are working across lots of different programmes of work. The main work that's relevant here is the different routes into AHP careers or a career as an ODP, and the work to support students such as NETS, the AHP faculty test beds, and repair, which you can find out much more about on our website. During the first wave, we showed that AHPs are agile, adapting quickly to the changing circumstances, and we managed to have over 700 students out on placement in London, with a big push in innovation and use of digital. And here I think it's just important to highlight that there are numerous barriers and challenges to practice learning, some staff related, such as redeployment, sickness, annual leave and burnout, environmental factors such as social distancing, small space, and competition for practice learning environments. And it's important to think about each of these barriers and work out how we might try and overcome them. Many of you will have seen and engaged in the crowdsourcing event, which has formed some of the evidence for the objectives of the Health Education England Practice Learning Expansion Programme. And you commented on these main 6 themes, particularly types and models of practice learning and the potential diversity of settings, how practice learning is coordinated to best effect, standardisation, particularly of paperwork and terminology. So the reason I'm trying my best to use the words practice learning rather than placements. The programme aims to ensure adequate AHP practice learning capacity and quality and has measurable objectives and outputs, including increasing practice learning and evaluation of the funding. There's a practice learning exchange set up to share resources and ideas, which you can join through our website. And you can find links to resources such as webinars and quick guides, which have been developed all on the HEE website. In London, £1.2 million was given from Health Education England to support practice learning, and largely this money was spent on roles such as practice education facilitators to support the work highlighted in the programme, mostly around coordinating placements and considering new placement models and settings, as well as laptops, tablets and techs. There was also some funding for place-based projects as well. In London, Health Education England have set up some opportunities to engage with practice learning. We have the AHP Practice Learning Club, which is a Microsoft Teams group and community of practice, and this is a space to connect and network with lots of resources available. We have our AHP Practice Learning Masterclasses, and this is an opportunity to hear from experts in the field about their experiences of practice learning. And we're really keen to ensure we reach our ODP colleagues, so please do get in touch with us if you'd like to be involved. Thank you so much for listening. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and we'll share these slides as there are some links and resources at the end. Please do give us a follow on Twitter to keep up to date with work going on in the capital. And I hope to have highlighted that we need to grow our AHP workforce gradually over the next few years through apprenticeships, as well as the usual routes. And currently there are real challenges to student practice learning, but hopefully we can help tackle this through considering every opportunity, which the team here at LSBU are progressing well with, to develop sustainable practice learning for our AHP students and future workforce. And I think Thomas is going to hand over next to talk through this in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. I'm just going to get up my screen. Okay, so hello everyone. So as Rebecca mentioned, my name is Thomas Ince and I'm the AHP Practice Learning Lead here at the university. And I work closely alongside our nursing and social work colleagues, as well as our AHPs, to ensure that we're providing a diverse and adequate number of practice learning opportunities for our students here at LSBU. I'm going to present to you today a brief overview of how we intend to take the information across all the relevant platforms that have been provided to produce a high quality overarching AHP practice learning strategy for the students here at LSBU. I firstly want to start with this quote, which I nabbed off the HE website from Stuart Norton, which sums it up nicely for me. So as well as students learning the actual clinical skills of their profession, practice learning is also about learning about the organisation, the culture within that organisation, and professionalism. And that's really so that our students can go on to become the well-rounded professionals that with the skills that employers are seeking. And I feel that innovative approaches to practice learning will help ensure that practice learning is not a barrier to increasing our student population and creating well-rounded graduates. So at the university, in my role, I've got three main missions. The first is around practice learning expansion, and that's firstly to ensure that and reduce the risk of placement shortfalls across each of the AHP professions, and also to expand some of our AHP programs. Secondly, we also want to ensure that these opportunities are of high quality through a multifactorial approach, and I'll be looking at that later. And finally, we would like to disrupt the status quo of institutionalized racism and colonialism with respect to practice learning. And I'll be presenting on this separately with one of our occupational therapy students, Almu. So with regards to practice learning expansion, we would like to ensure that every practice learning opportunity has one of the pillars of practice at the center of that placement opportunity. These pillars of practice contain common elements which are applicable to all practitioners. So for example, clinical practice is going to be the most common and most used pillar within practice learning, especially for ODPs as they need to complete their competencies. It's to firstly ensure that each of these students are providing safe and effective person-centered care and utilising their professional judgment and decision-making. Other opportunities may become apparent through leadership placement opportunities, and that may be to look at teamwork and development roles, as well as looking at the professional and organisational leadership, as leadership is required at all levels within an organisation. We're also interested in research and development practice learning opportunities to get students involved in producing evidence at an early stage and getting them involved in looking at how research and clinical practice link up. And finally, there are opportunities within the facilitation of learning arena, where students are able to participate in projects and support the wider pieces of work going on in the NHS. We'd also like to make use of our diverse and virtual opportunities that have come about mostly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So alongside these pillars of opportunity, there are also others available. So for example, with our ODP colleagues, they've been fantastic during the pandemic in working in a variety of acute settings. And we're looking at whether students can work in more of these settings in the future. We've looked at physiotherapy students within osteopathic clinics, and that is something that is ongoing and sustainable. We've also received a grant of £240,000 to set up peer-enhanced e-practice learning opportunities, and we're in the process of recruiting a simulation practice learning developer at the moment. And then finally, we also have some of our AHP students who are completing practice learning opportunities within vaccination centres. So they are learning whilst also supporting the population in the immunisation effort. So what I see it as really is that there are endless practice learning opportunities out there, a bit like this fruity machine on the left-hand side. However, it's good to know that there are lots of lights, buttons and whistles going on that fruity. So it's important that we hone it down into a more streamlined approach, generally with 4 main themes. For example, an NHS organisation may be offering a placement within an outpatient setting. So that practice learning pillar would be clinical. The supervision may be a hub and spoke model, and the modality is very much likely to be face-to-face. In addition to these, I understand that within operating theatres, nurses and ODPs work closely together. As part of my role as a repair fellow, I've seen a variety of supervision models used in theatres across London and outside of London, and we'll be looking to explore these further in the future. LSBU has been and is keen in the future to continue to collaborate with our providers. We want to ensure that we create the best possible opportunities and outcomes for our students. And we're currently doing this through a number of different forums. So as Chloe mentioned, through the Placement Club and Masterclasses, through relevant HEI forums, through the LSAP group for physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech, we don't have speech and language therapy but for those two, and also the London Placement Partnership group. We're also willing to collaborate with and want to work with wider networks. So that includes our local community, the HCPC, Health Education England, and our AHP faculties within London. And we have a representative attend all of these to ensure that we have them all covered. So expanding practice learning capacity mustn't come at the expense of practice learning quality. Our strategy is firstly to ensure that each student is offered a range of patient and non-patient opportunities that reflects their profession and the pillars of practice. These opportunities will be measured and monitored using their student profile, or for ODP, their competency framework. Each practice learning site has a placement agreement in place to ensure that students are being well supported and trained by educators, as well as LSBU and the placement site understanding their obligations under the agreement. We also have quality monitoring audits, and we've just going to start a new quality monitoring matrix with other universities to ensure that we're meeting our HCPC obligations. And we also gain regular student feedback, and we'll be looking to do this more in the future. Finally, that each course at LSBU has a practice placement, either preparation day or clinical educator days, to ensure that our educators are well trained and set up for them to provide education for our students. Thank you. I'm next going to pass over to Joanne, who's going to discuss, Joanne and Tom, who are going to discuss ODP practice learning examples in more detail.
Hello there. So I am Joanne and placement lead for the ODP provision at LSBU. So just bear with me for 1 second while I share my screen. Okay, so we're going to talk about ODP placement provision, and obviously we kind of know that
Sorry, Joanne, it's not in slideshow mode at the moment.
Oh, okay. Okay, apologies, I'm having problems trying to put it into.
No worries. If you just there's the button just along the bottom, next to where the volume is, just to the left of the volume, the zooming out. Sorry, the bottom right hand corner.
It is not
Okay.
allowing me to see the bottom of my screen, I'm afraid.
If you go to slideshow in the top tab bar, if you just go along, so you've got file, home, and along from there, you should see slideshow.
I'm afraid not. I've got more. I've got pause share, new share, participants.
In that case, if you double click on the first slide, it should also give you the option to start from the beginning.
Okay. And it's not.
Or try right click and then start slideshow. No. Okay. Move along the top. You'll see slideshow, and that's it, and then from beginning.
From beginning. Okay. Sorry about that. Don't know what's happened to my image there. So apologies to everybody for that. Obviously we're talking about practice placement, and we know that practice learning is an essential component of the ODP accredited course. And obviously this allows the student opportunity to consolidate the academic components of the course with the clinical and practical aspects of their placement and professional development. So thinking about this and placement learning provision, how do we accommodate this with our students? So particularly with the ODP student placement, one of the wonderful parts of it is that our students are allocated within one trust for the entirety of their 3-year course. And we feel that this adds to the overall experience as students have the opportunity to become familiar with the departmental education practice team, local supervisors and assessors, obviously the multidisciplinary teams in theatre, and the trust and its policies and procedures. And ultimately, this results in an ability for them to become an integral part of the theatre team. The added benefit is that the theatre teams and managers become very familiar with the student in their placement area, and obviously get to know their abilities over the 3 years. Historically, the majority of our students that have completed their 3-year course have all been offered substantive posts within their trusts on completion of the degree. So we're also aware that obviously theatre placements are under substantial pressure for clinical placements from other allied health professional and nursing students. And with this comes obviously the challenge of varied practice assessment documents and competencies. So to overcome this challenge, the team offer and deliver in-house trust practice assessment document sessions. And this offers the opportunity for new staff and local supervisors and assessors to review and become familiar with the specific ODP documentation and learning expectations. This in turn adds value as mentors and new staff gain greater understanding, and this improves the support available to our students within the placement areas, and thus encourages them to meet their clinical learning outcomes. So that's a little bit about our placement provision. Part of placement provision is obviously, as everybody prior to me, Tom and so on, have alluded to, it's about building a cohesive partnership. And we do this between the academic team on the ODP academic team, and obviously with student and placement. And we know that this is an essential component and is the main driver to the success of our programme. So we encourage this by opening up communication channels between all parties, and this is instigated by providing regular forums. These include regular practice development, or what we call lead mentor meetings over the course of the year, and these offer the perfect arena for our fellow practice educators across our 14 placement sites to meet, discuss current situations in the clinical and placement areas, and fosters an environment to discuss challenges and encourage a collective approach to areas for course provision and improvement. Placement providers and student representatives from each year are also invited to attend 2 course board meetings over the year, and this offers the course team and placement areas and students an opportunity to review and realise the delivery of academic components, and an opportunity to gain a collective view from the student representatives about any concerns and or positive aspects from an academic and placement perspective. We also hold regular surveys and audits which help us to collect input from placement providers and students, and the main focus of these is around placement provision, mentor-student ratios, significant or potential concerns, and this offers us as a team and collectively with placement a valued insight to challenges and positive aspects of both placement and student perspectives. And where needed, this obviously fuels discussion with all parties around positive changes to enhance our placement provision. To further enhance student placement experience, each student on the course is assigned a link visiting lecturer from our academic course team, and this offers the student a link between university and the placement area. And with regular contact and semester meetings, this ultimately ensures that the student has the relevant support and links available as and when they require. So that's a little bit about our provision around practice placement and our relationship that we have with our practice placement providers, which is obviously very important. With this, obviously, we've got some future strategies that we want to look at and have started to develop as a team. And some of these are based around attrition rates and evidence from the repair project that kind of revealed to us that first year students with no healthcare experience believe that they were not prepared enough for the clinical environment. So with this in mind, and due to the acute nature of operating theatres, where it's very hard to facilitate clinical work placements, we're in the process of developing and incorporating a central placement page. And this is held on the university virtual learning environment and is for all year students to access. And we're planning to roll this out at the beginning of the next academic year. So this area will kind of include generic placement information, specific individual trust orientation and contact information, frequently asked questions around placements, and practice assessment document guidance and online recordings. We also hope that we will be able to build a buddy scheme and online chat forums, and we hope that this will facilitate an avenue for peer support and communication around placement activities. Obviously, we will monitor the effectiveness of this approach, and we'll use student-led suggestions to improve this aspect. Other things that we are looking at, and Rebecca alluded to previously, was about our leadership provision. Obviously, we're looking to improve this so that our undergraduates that are already in place also have various academic modules which are spread over the 3-year pathway. These obviously incorporate some leadership focus and aid in development of students' awareness, self-awareness, working with others. And we also in the 3rd year have the 3rd years developing and leading on a change project. Obviously, we appreciate that our approach to leadership needs to be more signposted and explicit and in line with Health Education England guidance. So we are looking to introduce a practical placement with a specific leadership component, and we hope that this will enhance the programme and support our undergraduate students to develop as leaders, and hope that this will ultimately offer them with improved leadership qualities, skills, behaviours, and the mindset that is required to improve and action positive changes in patient care experience and outcomes. Other things that we're looking at is a 3rd year specialism expansion, and this is to offer our placement areas with a varied 3rd year specialism portfolio. And we hope that this will allow for greater student placement capacity and prevent some of the historical bottlenecks in paediatric anaesthetic placement provision that we have experienced in the past. Specialist areas that we are proposing, and obviously this will be in collusion with our practice placement partners. We're looking to kind of build the students' overall knowledge in areas such as bariatric, thoracic, neurological, and cardiac specialisms. So that's a little bit about our future strategies. And I would like now to take this opportunity to welcome one of our current 3rd year students, Thomas McGurran, who has kindly agreed to offer his thoughts on his practice placement experience. So I thank you, Thomas, in advance. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jo. So yeah, my name is Thomas. I'm a 3rd year student ODP. I started my placements at St George's. I spent 2 years there. Unfortunately, COVID interrupted my placements, and it meant that I then had to change site. But Jo was instrumental in helping me with that. So having the link lecturer really helped in that circumstance. I was able to talk to the uni, talk to the placement provider, and adjust to the situation to facilitate my learning. One of the things I really enjoyed while I was at George's was getting to learn all the local policies, getting to know the team, what practice was like and how it differed from other sites. And because of that, I built a really good rapport with the team, having that long placement. I built some really good professional relationships. In my 2nd year, I was even getting invited to Christmas parties, and I felt more grounded. And in terms of qualifying now, I've got a job in the site I trained in as well. I've got a job in the new site. The staff know my limitations, so I found that they're more likely to help me if I'm, say, struggling with a list. They'll come in and maybe give me a hand with something, give me some advice. So people are more amenable when you've been there for a long period of time, has been my experience with the program. Also, you get to know where all the equipment is. I don't have to hunt around for ages and ages looking for stuff. Like when I was first there, that's a huge benefit. Will help me when I go into my role as well.
Thank you, Tom. Tom and I agreed to do a bit of a facilitated Q&A, didn't we, in this part of the session? So you've mentioned some fantastic points about place-based opportunities. So for those people that don't know, for the ODP program at London South Bank University, it is place-based. So each of our students are allocated a trust and work around those various sites. And you've mentioned some of the benefits around sort of like getting to know the people and the culture of the trust. Have you experienced any other benefits and what your employment prospects are?
Yeah, so like I said, getting ingrained into the workplace culture, there's more of a social aspect to work. It doesn't make it feel as it's a lot nicer walking to a list of people that you know, and you can get on with things. Maybe have a bit of a joke about how things are going, and you get some resilience in the face of challenges with that if you've got a strong team behind you. And with job prospects, so although I've got a job at my second site, St Helier, I am looking forward to starting bank over at St George's, where I trained for 2 years, because I feel like I almost in a way miss the team there as well. So I've got this duality, which is sort of unique. But one other benefit is the networking. I've got to see surgeons and anaesthetists cross sites who have recognized me and said, "Oh, how are you getting on? Like, how's your training going?" And it's good to have that constant feedback from different professionals.
It's fantastic that you've managed to gain employment at one of the organisations that you worked with. So big congratulations for that, Tom. Were there any barriers at all that you felt, or any problems you felt with being in the same trust for each of those practice learning opportunities?
For me personally, there really weren't any, because like I said, I got on pretty well with everyone that I worked with, and I fit quite nicely into both sites. And for it suits me perfectly, having that long-term rapport. I keep saying rapport, but it is rapport, that you build with the team.
And would you so what would you recommend to placement sites that are considering sort of those place-based opportunities with induction and things? So for induction as an example, have you found having like a really thorough induction at the site and getting to know people really important to you?
Yeah, definitely. So when I first started in my first year, first placement, the practice educator took me around to the departments, had me meet my mentors, explained what my placement was going to be about, and Jo was obviously there as well to explain things at meetings when she came over. So yeah, having a structured induction really helped sort of ingrain me in, instead of me turning up saying, "Oh, hi, I'm Tom, I'm here for this, I'm here for that." Although that did come later, that initial, sort of dipping your toes in really helped.
Super. Thank you, Tom. We really appreciate and value your input here.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move on to the AHP Anti-Racism Practice Learning Strategy at LSBU, and I'm going to share my screen. Not sure that's it, that's not it. Bear with me, bear with me. Okay. Okay. So really pleased and proud to present this today with one of our AHP students, Almu, who is going to introduce herself very shortly. This is an AHP anti-racism practice learning strategy that we've come up with at LSBU. And the first thing that I would like to say is that I am not spearheading this. We have a panel and a collaborative and co-produced groups that we are working with that help collaborate in the production of this work. I just want to recognize that I am not spearheading this as a white man, but I am a contributor as a white ally. And this presentation has been created by myself, Cheryl Tayson, who's one of our AHP students, Mushrat Ahmed Landigu, who's a senior lecturer in occupational therapy and 2 days a week works as a student success and anti-racism practitioner, and Dr. Anita Atwell, who's associate professor in allied health. And I will allow Almu to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Almu, and as Thomas said, I am a final year occupational therapy student, and I'm also a member of the Allyship and Cultural Equity Group, ACG, and the AHP Plus Anti-Racism Practice Learning Group.
Great, thank you. So just to start off, here is a quote from June of 2020, and this quote was released by the senior leadership team at LSBU to really highlight their commitment to our Black and minoritized ethnic students, teachers and alumni, to provide assurance that we are going to act on and create action to disrupt the status quo of institutionalized racism and colonialism that's going on within our university and community. So to tell you a little bit about the background of how we've got to this point. So back in 2015, a gentleman called Chimani Maxwelly, who was a political activist and alumni of the University of Cape Town, started a movement called the Rhodes Must Fall movement. There was a statue on that campus, and he threw feces at the statue in a political move to highlight the need to decolonize the curriculum there. And that term decolonize then spread throughout South Africa and moved to spread then throughout the world.
Yes, another important movement to highlight was the Black Lives Matter that started in 2013 and then again in 2020, and it started the socio-political discourse regarding structures and institutions continuing the status quo of race and health inequalities. And so people started to ask themselves, why are these not being disrupted?
And AHP bodies, including many of our AHP governing bodies and Suzanne Rushtrick from NHS England, put out statements in solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement with our students who racialize as Black or who racialize as minoritized ethnic.
Following on these statements of solidarity, AHP students racialized as Black and minoritized ethnicities challenged these bodies by asking the question, where is the change after the platitudes? So basically they were saying it's all very good to claim solidarity, but we need some action to be implemented.
And then following that, those bodies, governing bodies and organizations further reacted and started to use the term decolonizing the curriculum in AHP discussions and began the momentum of change that's needed within our organizations.
And so at LSBU AHP Plus, we decided to start with two affinity groups, ACG and RACG, and the group of these two groups is to be linked up with Thomas Hinz and Rachel Pitton.
And then, so out of these two groups, they are there to obviously learn, develop, as we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, and then increasing the confidence and safe space discussions for those stories to be shared with the Dean and myself, so that it can really help support and motivate a co-produced group to act.
So our mission statements are to co-produce an anti-racism and anti-oppression and anti-discrimination action-focused approach to practice learning, and secondly, to disrupt the status quo of institutional racism and colonialism with respect to practice learning.
At this point, I just wish to share my reflection as a white ally. So I started this role about 6 months ago, and when I was speaking with Mish and Anita, Cheryl and Almu, I wanted to be part of that co-produced framework that we could create a strategy. And for those people that may know me, I'm very much a doer and very keen to get things going. So I knew that I wanted to engage with AHP students and professionals as part of this stakeholder engagement process to try and make it work. So I probably naively set up some stakeholder events to try and gain some views from minoritized ethnic students and staff members so that we could really have a sort of a wider discussion. I set up these events, and then as we got closer to the events happening, I hadn't managed to gain input from one student. So I hadn't managed to get one student to sort of be part of those conversations. And so I ended up cancelling the events. And after further discussions with equality, diversity and inclusion officers at our organisation and others, and with Mish and Anita and some of our students, I personally hadn't appreciated enough as a white ally the safe spaces that need to be created to allow these conversations to occur, so that we can generate discussion and make change. And then following these event cancellations, I did have quite a number of students come and speak to me about how they could be involved in this work and how we could start to create action. So there was a sort of side positive note that made things better. And that's when we were able to create the AHP practice learning subgroup that connected with our ACE-G and RACE-G groups.
Yes, so just to explain a little bit more about the structure and governance of these groups. So basically, RACE-G and ACE-G are two affinity groups. And again, affinity groups are not new. They originated in America, and they originated when marginalized groups were allowed to work in all organizations. So these affinity groups enable a space for safe discussions, support and exchange of learning and advice in order to improve confidence in working in their jobs and within the organizations. And the outcome of these groups was to enable career progression and improve teamwork. And so, for example, you had the Black workers groups or the women groups. Therefore, ACE-G and RACE-G are both for staff and students. They have a flattened hierarchy of communication. This is to equalize the forum for safe and open discussions. And additionally, we have terms of references for all of those who want to join the groups. Like Tom was introducing before, the first project that came out of the affinity groups is the forming of the AHP Plus anti-racism practice learning subgroup. And this is an offshoot group from the AHP practice learning group to which everybody is invited. And this is because the work of anti-racism is and anti-discrimination is for everybody to do, and not only for those who are being oppressed. And it benefits everybody, really. Our placement collaborations are an equalizing forum for academics, staff, clinicians, and students. And we look to drive the necessary change from a diversity of thinking in order to enable positive of the students. And the relationship between these groups are collaborative, not consultative. And we are hoping that this will grow as a collective in order to enable change in policy, processes, practice and research. And we do appreciate that this is going to be a long-term goal, but this is why we're talking about this today, because we need to grow these groups and we need to grow as a collective.
Next is our model of action and engagement. So we want to start action straight away, and we've created our safe spaces so that we can have a lot of those discussions and then create action during our subgroups. So alongside our actions, we want to ensure we have student engagement and empowerment. And the hope is that as we increase in our actions and influence, that students will become more engaged and empowered to participate in the work that we're doing. So I bet you're wondering what some of our actions are. So we're happy to go through some of the actions that we currently have. So firstly, we've got to make sure that our actions are evolved around a community of learning, that we have collaborative conversations, and that we are part of the conversation when reviewing current practice and policies. And we're currently reviewing our complaints policy for AHPs when it comes to practice learning. And we've got to make sure that we've got to be a critical friend, and that we need to develop a shared AHP ethos and network amongst our practice learning needs with respect to anti-racism and allyship. So our first action that we want to go through is to ensure that we co-produce and agree an umbrella action term for our AHP practice learning and anti-racism group, so that we can use that term when influencing others. We've now created a poll for all of our AHP students, and we'll be putting that out to the out to the student population this week, so that our students can have an opportunity to vote on what they think is the best out of 4, what is the best option as an umbrella term. Our second main point of action is around language and the language that we use within these groups. I think it's important, and the group feels it's important, that we have a shared language around and shared terminology that we use within these groups, that all that we can agree on, and that we can use to then influence language across the wider university and our wider networks. And finally, we've got to ensure that we begin to look at incorporating anti-racism and allyship on our modules where we have where practice learning sits within, so that we can begin to really try and disrupt the status quo within this area.
In addition to that, we're also aiming to support and advise the strategy for inclusion of anti-racism and allyship training for all personal tutors. And this is to enhance their ability to support students when on practice and to collaborate with all the stakeholders. And an important part of this training is actually making all personal tutors aware of their privilege and knowing how they can use that privilege to support students doing placement. Also, we are looking to establish networks with RACG and ACG to collaborate with common areas of interest where the opportunity arises. And finally, we would like to showcase role models from the Black and minoritized ethnic communities through invitation to speak with all students at LSBU AHP Plus.
Thank you for listening to this part of the showcase, and we've just shared some of our links that have been supporting our learning and development. So following this, we want to keep talking and learning and collaborating with others, and we're very happy to have a discussion and answer questions on this as we move through the showcase. We're now going to hand over to Anissa and Daniel, who are going to talk about the apprenticeship route for ODPs at LSBU.
Thank you, Thomas and Almu. A really warm welcome to you all that have joined us today for this showcase. Just going to quickly share my slides with you. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So today I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the ODP Integrated Degree Apprenticeship in relation to why apprenticeships were actually developed. What sort of considerations are there in relation to apprenticeships? What are they actually based on? So before I do that, let me just introduce myself. My name is Anissa Edmani. I'm an associate professor in AHS, and I oversee the apprenticeships that are being delivered or being developed at this time. So just to start with, firstly, so why apprenticeships in health and social care? Many of you will know that apprenticeships are being developed and delivered as an additional pathway. It's not a new pathway. It is a pathway that has been around for many years. Apprenticeships or in-service type delivery has come and gone over the last couple of decades. And we're in a new cycle of apprenticeship delivery now. And it's considered slightly new just because of where the funding stream comes for these particular individuals. It is actually being used across a large number of sectors, and health and social care is one of those. We all may know that attrition is a real concern in some professions within AHS, and it is a real issue for future workforces. So apprenticeships are a new or considered relatively new, yet additional pathway to get individuals into our different professions. It's not there to take over or be in place of traditional route courses that are already in place at the moment. They do tend to attract suitable candidates from different backgrounds and different personal situations, because apprenticeships can be done with two different streams. Either it is introducing new people into the workforce, so a whole new role that's actually developed by the trust, or it can be used to upskill individuals that are sitting in slightly lower band 3, band 4 roles within the trust, and the department is really keen to upskill those individuals in order to be able to get them a professional qualification, to get them working within that profession. And so we at LSBU really do support the widening participation agenda in higher education. And so apprenticeships is one of the routes that we really support that agenda. What else apprenticeships will do, we're hoping, fingers crossed, going forward, is that it's going to enable professions to develop further, really a chain reaction type of situation. So the more individuals we have in our workforce, the more the workforce is actually fully staffed, the more opportunity there will be within those professions to further develop the profession and undertake research, etc. So it really is there to support the profession overall on a long-term basis. So an apprenticeship is an actual job. So I have a lot of individuals that say, well, what is an apprenticeship? And it is actually a job. An individual is actually employed by the trust as an apprentice. And then that apprentice is then directed out to the HEE to help with the academic elements of their training. The apprentice gains a wide range of skills through lots of different situations that they undertake. So there is the clinical development that they do within the clinical site or the trust in which they're employed. They have off-the-job training that they do with us at the HEI or LSBU, and then are able to take the skills that we develop, not only theory and academic skills, but some of the clinical skills that we do within our labs at LSBU, that they're then able to take back to their clinical departments and further develop them. An apprentice does need to be over the age of 18 in order for them to be able to engage with us at LSBU. 18 is the higher education age. And they must be spending at least 50% of their working hours in England. And that's really quite important that this point is taken note of. And that's because the apprenticeship levy that the money will be drawn down from is actually an English apprenticeship levy. So that individual does need to be working in England for 50% of that time. And they must not be in full-time education anywhere else. So those are the requirements. And from an employer's perspective, for those of you that are from trusts and from an employer's perspective, they can, like I said, come from two different perspectives. The first is where you're looking to upskill staff within your own clinical departments, and you're looking at employees that are already in employment to move them into an apprentice status. And then those that are looking at developing workforce as additional roles or additional positions within your trust. Developing health apprentices at LSBU is a very sort of collaborative and functional process that's undertaken with our clinical partners. And in some situations, we do also engage with the local authorities, depending on the professional group that we are looking at developing. They are done as integrated apprenticeships, and that really means that all of the requirements for the apprenticeship, so there's a wide-ranging there's a wide number of guidelines and requirements that need to be sort of adhered to for apprenticeships. We basically incorporate all of that within the actual degree, so within the 3-year structure of the student's apprenticeship journey. We have aligned delivery of all of our apprenticeships. So the ODP apprenticeship, which will be going, is live at the moment. Actually, its first intake will start in September 21. So we are actually in our recruitment phase at the moment. And it is a real focus for the ODP team, the apprenticeship pathway. And that particular program has been really aligned to ensure that it is being delivered side by side with the traditional route students. And with the wider AHS delivery. There are a few across the board multidisciplinary modules that get developed and delivered from the perspective of multidisciplinary working. And so the apprenticeship has been developed to align side by side with that. What that also allows us to do and ensure that the student gets the most of is peer support and experience. So really getting support from all students within their cohort, not just apprenticeship students, but traditional route students, because all students have very different experiences within their clinical placement learning settings. And so really learning from each other is a really positive, advantageous point for each. The other thing that apprenticeships have is that we have a dedicated central apprenticeship team at London South Bank University. And so those of you that do already work with us at LSBU from the traditional route perspective, you'll normally work between the clinical trust and the course team at LSBU. But here we have a third layer of support, which is a central apprenticeship team. And individuals that will take on apprenticeships in their trust will have quite a lot to do with them, because there is dedicated support very specifically for us at AHS. Apprenticeships are very slightly different in relation to the way that they're actually built. So they are based on knowledge, skills, and behaviors. So an apprenticeship standard was developed and agreed prior to the agreement of an ODP apprenticeship being developed. And these are based on a range of different knowledge expectations, behavior expectations, and skill expectations of an individual that is coming up to qualification. And so as a student goes through their 3-year apprenticeship, they will be mapped against these KSBs. And these KSBs are not very different to the benchmark statements or that we already have for our traditional route students. They're just developed with KSBs very specifically, because that is the language that the Institute of Apprenticeships actually use. And so as you look at a program, an ODP apprenticeship program, as you go through the year, you're able to see the different building blocks of KSBs that are necessary for the apprentice to be able to demonstrate in order for them to be able to progress through the year. So it is a really very structured and clearly outlined program. There's a large number of particular elements within the pathway that an apprentice's journey involves. And we at LSBU support not only the student all the way through their apprenticeship journey and the requirements of that apprenticeship journey, we also support the employer. And through the employer, we support mentors and practice educators, for example, that might be the individuals that are supporting your employee or your apprentice. And we support you right from the beginning. So we start this off right from the marketing and recruitment or admissions processes of apprentices that you might be thinking about taking on, be that the upskilling of your staff, or be that you're looking at a new role and you want to put out a job advert. The apprenticeship team and ourselves really support you through all of those different processes. So we've tried to make the apprenticeship journey as accessible and try to make sure that it's not as time consuming as it could be, by ensuring that we really work quite collaboratively and together and engage with the 3 different parties that are necessary for an apprenticeship to be successful. And that is obviously the employer, the apprentice themselves, because they will obviously have some requirements for their own learning and their own needs, and also us as the HEI. So there is a very thorough tripartite relationship that goes into place in ensuring that a student is successful. I always like to end on this slide very quickly, if I can, if we do have any potential ODP apprentices in the audience. And this is because we do really encourage you to be a student too, while you are within the LSBU setting of your apprenticeship journey. There are a lot of advantages to being a student, and a lot of recreational activities, fingers crossed, that should go back into place again when we're all able to be back on site. And so we do highlight that there are lots of fun advantages to being an apprentice, because you do get the student status within the HEI setting. But just to lastly end on, the ODP team in relation to their apprentice delivery is really quite supportive in helping trusts get up and off the ground, especially if it's a new apprentice or a new journey that you're taking on, and we'll definitely put you in touch with the central apprenticeship teams if you are keen to actually take on an apprentice. I am now going to pass you on to Dan. He's going to take us through some of the recruitment and admission requirements of the apprenticeships. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anissa. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Roger. I'm a senior lecturer in operating department practice and also the admissions tutor for the standard entry degree and the degree apprenticeship as well. So I'm just going to be talking a little bit about entry criteria for both options, both the standard degree entry and the apprenticeship as well. And let me on to my first slide. So yeah, just outlining very quickly what the entry criteria, and this is all available on the LSBU ODP website as well. And you'll see at the top that the first two criteria, all applicants, whether you're a potential apprentice or looking at developing the apprenticeship as well at your particular trust and wanting to understand the entry criteria you're looking for, perhaps your existing staff, or if you're thinking about advertising externally, this is what we're going to be looking for. So in terms of, yeah, all applicants have to have 5 GCSEs A to C or 4 to 9 in maths, science and English or equivalents. This can be functional skills as well. If perhaps you're a trust, again, looking at upskilling sort of existing staff, I think at LSBU as well, we do offer a opportunity for people who are, for trusts who are looking at appointing apprentices, for them to be tested regards to maths and English at Lambeth College. And they'll be able to assess their whether they can just take a level 2 functional skills test or whether they'll need to go on additional sort of short course and things like that. And in terms of additional requirements as well, you have to, any student or apprentice has to have the 112 UCAS points. So standard entry students, that's usually met by achieving BBC A level or a BTEC National Diploma at a DMM or access course as well with 15 distinctions and 30 merits, or any other equivalent level 3 course that amounts to 112 UCAS points. Now, if you are someone who doesn't have 112 UCAS points, but you do meet all the other essential criteria, and you have done a level 3 equivalent, a level 3 course, like for instance, MVQ or another apprenticeship, then we do run as an alternative a level 4 course. That, providing you meet all the other essential criteria and you complete that level 4 course at LSBU, we'll count that as meeting the entry criteria. And that's something we develop with stakeholders when developing the apprenticeship itself. For your apprentices as well, the slight difference is that you do need to have the care certificate as well, which a lot of existing staff, support workers will usually have the care certificate already. But if you are a stakeholder looking at developing your staff towards the apprenticeship, then you will need to get them. It's essential. You cannot start the apprenticeship course without having the care certificate as well. And obviously, you also, standard entry students have to be interviewed as well, and for apprentices they'd have to be past an interview that would be jointly held between the employer and us. So if you already meet entry criteria towards or you're working towards achieving it for standard entry, then you can apply via UCAS on the LSBU ODP website. And obviously a common question is, well, what do you do if you don't meet the entry criteria? Well, as I said, I already mentioned in terms of maths and English that you can do functional skills, which is a much quicker way rather than completely redoing a GCSE, and that's not always feasible for people as well. Or you can look at doing an access course, or perhaps a level 3 apprenticeship. that will result in you having the 112 UCAS points. And as I already mentioned, for those who are looking to recruit apprentices, that if they don't have the 112 UCAS points, we do have, as I said, this level 4 course called CPBD for academic development. So yeah, so if you're looking to become an apprentice when your employer doesn't offer the ODP apprenticeship at the moment, then I would recommend several things. Is speak to a clinical educator within your department, whether that's theatres or another department. Speak to the matron in the theatre or your theatre manager, and I would recommend discussing your aspirations. You know, that you do want to upskill, and you do want to become a registered ODP, and you see this as the route that you would like to pursue. And there are numerous benefits as well. I mean, both to the individual apprentice or student themselves, and the department as well. So, you know, I think that, you know, if your department is willing to invest in you, obviously people that are going to be usually, hopefully, are going to want to stay and continue to work in that department following completion of their apprenticeship. And depending whether you're a private hospital or NHS trust, you know, they're all going to be paying into are likely to be paying the apprenticeship levy. Obviously, if you have a wage bill over more than 3 million, and we're happy to discuss the ODP apprenticeship with your workplace. So if you are an NHS trust who's not currently running the ODP apprenticeship, and you'd like to find out more in terms of the specifics around that, then I'd be happy to talk through that with you, as well as would our the rest of our team and the apprenticeship team as well, to discuss that with you. And if you are an individual who's looking to become an apprentice, then I'd also be happy to speak with you more about that as well, in terms of you know, what you're going to need to do to get yourself prepared and ready to apply for an apprenticeship. So yeah, if you are an existing staff member at a trust and they are interested in running the degree apprenticeship, then you would have to get agreement and permission from your employer before applying for the degree apprenticeship. And this is very similar to the standard entry. You would just apply via the LSBU apprenticeship website, which is different to the standard entry website, and you would apply via Wazard there. Alternatively, a lot of trusts are now advertising for externally for ODP apprentices, so I'll keep your eye out for that. I know that GSTT have recently put an advert out for apprentices as well. They will be very competitive, and that's I think apprentices, perhaps more so than standard entry, are going to be incredibly competitive. So it's really important that you understand the role of an ODP, and actually what's distinct about an apprenticeship as well, I think is really important as well. And as I said, very happy to be contacted for advice if you're interested in becoming an apprentice, as I'm sure others will be as well. Okay, and that's me finished on the entry criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. If I could invite our other panelists to join us, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So we have a few questions. For our audience members, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box. We have a bit of time for questions. There aren't any in there yet, but please do pop them in and we will happily answer them for any of our panelists. So I'll put those to them. So I've got a question for Chloe to start with. Hi, Chloe. Where can people find out more about innovative practice learning models?
Thanks, Neil. So there's a few different spaces where you could find out a little bit about how other people are using innovative models. So an example might be a leadership placement, which we've discussed. And so if you have a look at our HEE website, there's quite a few different case studies and examples of different innovative placement models available there. We've also just had a soft launch of our new capital AHP website. So if you were to give HEE and capital AHP a Google, or I'll pop it into the chat, that might be more helpful, then you'll be able to find our new website. And if you have a look through there, you'll find some more information about practice learning and some of the work that we're doing at the moment within London. And just keep a close eye, because we're hoping to develop some blogs and some more case studies and things like that through the website over the course of the next few weeks. We've also got a Teams group, as we were saying in the presentation. So on Microsoft Teams, we've got a group where you can join, and there are lots and lots of resources available, links to webinars, and all sorts going on there. So if you would like to find out some more about that, I'll pop our email address, our AHP London email address, and our new website link into the chat. Thanks, Neil.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. So Thomas and Almu, one for you next. Is the anti-racism strategy being incorporated into practice educator training and updates?
We hope that's going to be the case moving forward. So at the moment, we are focusing on our staff, so primarily our link tutors and our lecturers. We've recently successfully got a bid for £25,000, and I have written up a proposal which has now gone to our Dean and Vice Chancellor today to get sign off. And the hope is that 60 of our staff members will be able to do some anti-racism and allyship training that's been set out by an external consultancy company, as well as our some of our staff internally. And we have the support mechanism around that with our affinity groups and the work that's going on with HEE. So that's what we're doing to start off with. And then once we've done phase 1 and phase 2, which is our education model, we will be training 15 people to do a train the trainer module. And at that point, we will be looking to see where we can utilize that training, either with students, either with student ambassadors, or then with our practice educators. I know there is a wider piece of work with regards to anti-racism and allyship training as part of our practice development and education days. So watch this space for that. That is, it is very much on the agenda. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, I'll pop it out to the team, but Joe, you might be able to answer this one. So looking at place-based models in ODP and partnerships, how have you created those partnerships, and what are the benefits and the challenges?
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for that question. I've only been in LSBU for 3 years, so some of these relationships were built before I came. So it's about maintaining those relationships with practice placement. And as I said in my presentation, it's about making sure that we facilitate regular meetings so that we can all kind of meet together and talk about practice placement issues or challenges across the different varying sites. So that's why it's nice to have everybody kind of collectively come. Obviously with COVID, we've had to kind of resort to the online meeting, which has been very successful actually. And most of our practice placement providers have been able to come along to those meetings. So that's fantastic. It's about making being transparent and open, I think, as well. That's one of the main drivers, I think, for our provision to work successfully between the higher education and the placement provider. And we always welcome anybody that wants to come along. So whether it happens to be AHP education leads within trusts, they're welcome to come to the lead mentor meetings as well. And I know that we have, I think we have one with us today. So hello to Eileen, who's one of the AHP leads for one of the trusts that that help support us with placement. So that's really, I think, the only provision that I can talk about. It's been historical, and we've continued to make sure and ensure that we maintain those relationships and keep our doors open to anybody that wishes to come along and take, come and listen to the challenges and the barriers that, some of the placement areas find across the course of the 3 years. I hope that's answered your question, Neil.
Thank you. And Anissa and Daniel, obviously kind of moving to an apprenticeship model for ODP is fairly new. What are some of the barriers and the benefits and challenges that you've encountered?
Thanks, Neil. It is very new still. We are on the first round. I think Rebecca would definitely be somebody who'd be able to answer that question a little bit more specifically for you. But it is our first round. We're really very eager and very encouraged by the responses that we've had with our trusts already. As Daniel mentioned, it is an incredibly small cohort that we're taking on this year. We're very keen on ensuring that the quality of our programs has been identified and maintained, especially through the apprenticeships, because it is an additional learning pathway to the traditional route that ODP already successfully runs. It will have all of the benefits of all the things that the ODP team already put into place for the traditional route students. So I don't know, Rebecca, if you wanted to mention if you know of any barriers or challenges that you've had so far at all?
I suppose there's been some along the way, but the programme has been developed in conjunction with, in the past, I think it goes back to Joe's question that she just answered as well. So the apprenticeship that we've got is based on the ODP course we already had. And that ODP course we already had was created with collaboration with the stakeholders, with the NHS trusts. And because of that, I think it kind of all marries in. And then with the apprenticeship, it's just sort of building on that. There's obviously challenges because apprenticeships are new for us as a team. And so obviously we've had a lot of learning to do around apprenticeships. But as I say, I think as we've based it on the model we've already got with adjustments that are apprenticeship specific. That's why obviously we're starting in September. So as you say, a small cohort will allow us to see whether that works as planned or whether we might need little adjustments as we go along. But I think it's the thing about doing that in conjunction with the people that are going to be employing the apprentices at the end of the day with our trusts, and just collaborating with things that work particularly well that we want to keep, and any things that we might need to change or do differently the following year. And that's been the same with us. With our normal course, with our standard entry students, we modify and improve the course from year to year, and our validated program was based on that. So yeah, lots of challenges, but I think with collaboration that they will end up having a better course as a result.
I think one obvious benefit as well is that I think since the removal of the more generous NHS bursary a few years ago, we saw quite a high drop in the rate of more mature students. And I think the hope is that that the apprenticeship will widen access for a lot of those mature individuals who had kind of counted themselves out of a career as a health professional, but specifically as an ODP. And so I think what's really exciting is widening it, ready for those people who via the apprenticeship, becoming an ODP has become a viable and more feasible option for them. So I think that's really exciting, especially for those existing staff who, couldn't, with families and dependents, things like that, who, leaving and taking up student loans and leaving employment was not an option. So I think it's really exciting for those individuals, again, to have a more diverse student professional group.
Thank you. And finally, just kind of looking at kind of like the positives of kind of like place-based models. Tom, I mean, it sounds like you've had a fantastic kind of opportunity, and thank you for being here and sharing that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about some of the other experiences that you've had? It's always great to hear from our students directly.
Yeah, no, definitely. One thing that I didn't sort of really touch on was how varied all the roles were that I came into contact during my placement. So I met like physiotherapists, on my ITU placement, I met ITU nurses, as well as obviously theatre nurses, like study nurses, etc. But also got to see a few radiographers coming into theatres, diagnostic radiographers. So yeah, you've really got to see sort of nearly the whole scope of allied health professionals.
Thank you. Thank you. That seems like a good note to end that on. And Tom Ince, I'm going to hand over to you for closing.
Thank you everyone for attending. It's great to share some practice learning opportunities and also the apprenticeship program for the ODPs. This is going to be the last of our AHP showcases for the time being, for the spring, and we look forward to doing some for therapeutic radiography, chiro and sports rehab come the autumn. So thank you for attending, and we look forward to popping this on YouTube and sharing it over the next year.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.